Just remember what your old pal said, son, you've got a friend. I'm saying you've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. You've got troubles, I've got two. There isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. We stick together, we can see it through, 'cause you've got a friend. Wow, wow, wow. Some other folks might be a little bit smarter than I am, bigger and stronger too, and doodly-doo. But none of them will ever love you the way I do. Just me and you, boy, and as the years go by, our friendship will never die. You're gonna see it's our destiny. 'Cause you got a friend in do-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-da. Shoo-be-doo-wop-wop.
He wanted us to sing those songs. He told us 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago. He said, I want to hear that.
Wow. What other word is there but wow? And can't you see Bob singing in that even right now? I can. Just amazing. So I want to welcome you to the beautiful Winnetka Congregational Church on this astonishingly sunny, bright, beautiful day to celebrate, well, first, of course, to mourn, but mostly to celebrate a very bright and sunny personality, Bob Smith, who is gone, never to be forgotten as long as we tell stories. So, again, welcome. Our first hymn for today is For All the Saints, which is printed in your bulletin. And if those who are able would rise, you can rise either in body or spirit.
To the world, their steadfast faith
Would you remain standing as you are able and join with me in reciting the 23rd Psalm? The Lord is my shepherd, I lack for nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Hello, everyone. I'm Harold Shermer, and I've been a friend of Bob's for about 25 years. Bob and I were both grown men when we met, but we got to talking and we bonded over similar formative experiences as young men during our time in Boy Scouts. And it's that story that I'd like to share today. And I'd also like to say that at one time, Bob worked for the Ford Tractor Company, and I worked for a successor of that company. So we also had a lot of great times talking about manufacturing plants, purchasing, and lots of fun things where even though we were different generations, we actually shared so much in common that Bob was a good and true friend. Well, Bob was an Eagle Scout, and he was a founding scout of New Wilmington, Pennsylvania, Troop 33. He was a member of the Order of the Arrow, which is Scouting's National Honor Society, and he was a former camp staff member in Pennsylvania. And Scouting is not just a stereotypical weekend camp out that you do with your kids, but rather it's an outdoor leadership training program and character development program, and those traits of leadership and character are what Bob carried with him through his life. Let me speak a little bit about Bob's time in Pennsylvania. He grew up in New Wilmington, a small town of 2,500 residents and a Presbyterian liberal arts college. Bob joined the Cub Scouts when he was 11 years old at the end of World War II. When he was younger than 11 at the end of World War II. And when he became 11, he wanted to join the Boy Scout troop, but there was no Boy Scout troop because the older men had left and gone off to fight the Second World War. So Bob, being one of the older kids in the town, went and got a group of kids together, and they met a man by the, let me look at my notes here. They met one of his, a man in town by the name of Mr. Ferris, who they convinced to become their scoutmaster. Well, New Wilmington had an old, what they called scout hut. It was actually a place that had earlier been a place for lifeguards at the town's swimming pool, but all of the scout equipment from before World War II was stored in there. Unfortunately, the key had been lost during the war and nobody knew how to get in. So Bob and his brother Herb over there, who I see laughing, actually went and broke into that building along with Mr. Ferris and were able to reopen it up and to restart the scout troop in Pennsylvania. And with that, Bob quickly advanced through the ranks and the leadership positions in scouting, becoming his troop's senior patrol leader. But then suddenly tragedy struck. When Bob was 14, his father died in an auto wreck. And so the people from the community, I don't know whom, but they came and they spoke to Bob and told him that his father had passed. The community and the scouting families in the community all sort of pulled together to help Bob's mother. They got her a job and a car, And then, as I understand it, the next summer, Bob was recommended by Scoutmaster Ferris for a job at a scout camp in Newcastle, Pennsylvania called Camp Agawam. And Bob worked there for several summers. He worked at the trading post, and he taught Scoutcraft outdoor skills, of which he became an expert. Herb, I spoke to earlier this week on the phone, and he told me that what he most remembers about Bob was a camp out when Bob wanted to cook a chicken, but rather than to just cook a chicken on a spit, what Bob did is he dug a hole, and he lined this hole with rocks. He took the chicken, he stuffed the chicken with vegetables, and he wrapped it with vegetable leaves, and I don't know, I'm going to assume perhaps a bit of aluminum foil, and then put it down in that hole and covered it with dirt. On top of the dirt, they started a fire, and they let that fire roar for 4 hours while the scouts enjoyed their fellowship. At the end of that time, they dug up the chicken and opened it up, and it was a perfectly moist, well-cooked chicken dinner feast. And that was all Bob's idea. And older experienced scouts like Bob became members of a Scouting's honor society called the Order of the Arrow. And in Lawrence County, Pennsylvania, where Bob was growing up, the Scouts organized themselves into a group that they called Paconkey Lodge, whose name honored an Indian chief from Pennsylvania who was one of the first Native Americans who was a Christian, and he also supported the British during the French and Indian War, so he's some notoriety in Pennsylvania. As an older scout, Bob began to become a leader in this Order of the Arrow group, and he received several recognitions from his peers. Within the Order of the Arrow, there are Ordeal members and Brotherhood members and Vigil members, and Bob worked his way up through there, but the leadership skills that he worked carried him through life. Bob worked in the buildings and grounds, as I understand it, at Westminster College in New Wilmington for a while. From there, he came here to Northwestern University with his trombone. When he later had a family, he became a cub master here in Winnetka, and he attended summer camp at Makajuan Scout Reservations with Derek and Brian. So many great scouting memories in his family now. The program says I'm supposed to do a broken arrow ceremony, but I don't have an arrow or anything like it. But if you could imagine, and oh, wow, I didn't even notice that. Okay, I was going to try to shorten this a bit, but I guess not if I have an arrow. So thank you, Jan. So this arrow is a symbol of the Order of the Arrow Scouting's honor society, and it was chosen by scouts of generations past because its point is keened and aimed high. The course is undeviating. Its direction is onward and upward. It was chosen by these scouts as a symbol of leadership. And when an Order of the Arrow member passes, scouts often break an arrow as a symbol of the end of strife and the beginning of peace. So with that, I would like to take this beautiful arrow here and break it. And then I'd like to come down and give it to Jan. Nowadays, so many arrows are carbon fiber or aluminum and they don't break, so it's a real find to get a real arrow. But with that, let me conclude with a verse that is traditionally part of that ceremony that scouts of Bob's generation would have done. O great Master, hear us in our thoughts, in our final tribute to Brother Bob. He who loved the haunts of nature, loved the moonlight on the water, loved the sunshine on the meadow, and loved the shadow of the forest. Loved the wind among the pine trees, and loved the rushing of great rivers. Loved the thunder of the mountains, and loved all of nature in its splendor. found in nature his duty to others, and pledged himself to cheerful service. Rest, brother, we know you well indeed, and now in peace you'll sleep. You've done your work and you've done it well, so none of us will weep. We'll miss your smile, but your master will guide your steps and point the way for you. Thank you, everyone.
Our next hymn is In the Bulb There Is a Flower, and if you could rise as you're able.
In the bulb there is a flower, in the seed an apple tree, in cocoons a hidden promise, butterflies will soon be free. In the cold and snow of winter, there's a spring that waits to be unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. There's a song in every silence, seeking word and melody. There's a dawn in every darkness, bringing hope to you and me. From the past will come the future, what it holds a mystery, unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. In our end is our beginning, in our time infinity. In our doubt there is believing, in our life eternity. In our death a resurrection, at the last a victory, unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see.
The reading is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verses 43 to 45. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be servant of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Amen.
Well, this part's called the reflection, and there is much to reflect on. And late this afternoon, just before I came over here, I found my initial notes that after Jan asked me to officiate this service, I had not been able to find, but I found them and I read them, and I thought, well, I can't incorporate it, but I am going to share it with you because often the first thoughts are the most accurate, as you probably know. So it's very short, but I wrote this. Bob was a man filled with and exuding love for fellow humans, a naturally elegant man, and not in the sophisticated raised pinky as you drink tea with the Queen, but in the grounded, this is who I am sense, in the it's how I live my life sense. It's everyday actions that express our relationship to others and to God, and Bob seemed to let his being in the world show that. So I hope this sets the direction my reflections are going to go. But I encourage you, if you haven't already, to read the beautiful obituary at the front of the bulletin, because it's filled with maybe the guiding principle of Bob's life: service to others. And I'm so grateful the family chose this particular reading that they did from Mark, because it is about servant leadership, which I think describes Bob so very, very well. So I'm going to expand just a little bit on the passage that Junia read just a moment ago, so that what Jesus told his disciples and us will make it more easy to understand, and again, hopefully set the tone of where this reflection is meant to go. So, James and John vied with each other to see who in heaven would sit on Jesus' right hand and who would sit on his left. When the other 10 heard this, they became indignant with James and John. So Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who were regarded as rulers of the Gentiles and the Jews lord it over them. They exercise authority over them. But not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be servant of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." So Winston Churchill, who saved democracy for all of Europe and was a very privileged member of the British aristocracy, was also known, besides his statesmanship, for a very hedonistic devotion to cigars, good cigars, brandy, and terrific food and good conversation. And yet, in spite of his entitlement, he said this, and I believe to my heart that he meant it. He said, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." And I find that just incredible for a very privileged member of the British aristocracy to say, which leads me back to the reading. Now, Mark's story is about Jesus telling two of his disciples, James and John, who want to know which of them in heaven would sit on either side of Jesus. And Jesus tells them, and the Bible never tells you exactly what was going through Jesus' mind, but probably Jesus had no small amount of real disappointment at these two worldly disciples, because they've got it completely backwards, as most of us do in this world, because that really is the nature of all living things, to seek the most favorable position. And so Jesus, without mincing any words, tells them, and I'm riffing a little bit here, but basically he says, no, no, no. If you truly want to be leaders, you have to be servants, only servants. And boy, that was probably just as hard to hear then as it is now. It's just not that natural. But hard or not, it's true. I think we all know from our own experiences that it is truly more blessed to give than to receive. And don't we all feel good when we do it? I know I do. I'm sure you do. Because giving of ourselves does not deplete us, as we might fear it will. Actually, it fills us up beyond the brim, but somehow, miraculously, we don't overflow. Instead, we simply expand to allow more room for more love and for more giving. Giving love, giving service doesn't deplete us if it's done in a healthy way, and Bob knew this. John Wesley, who is the co-founder of the Methodist denomination, once said this: Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, for as long as you can. And I think we can shorten it to just the first line that says, do all the good you can. And I think that's enough. We get the idea. And that saying sticks with me, first, because I've learned through life that it is true, and second, I believe that it is the embodiment of what Jesus told James and John. Do all the good you can. And so, again, I encourage you to read that beautiful obituary to see Bob's living example of this profound but simple truth. But there are other examples, too, of John Wesley's generous wisdom, do all the good you can, and Winston Churchill's belief that to get a life, you first give. And this is going to sound like a commercial, and I don't mean it to, so please keep that in mind as I go, because I want to talk to you just as an example of how this works in the real world. There's a restaurant/coffee house in Evanston and Highland Park. It's called Kurt's Cafe. Pages want to stick together. And what it does, it takes kids in Evanston and Highland Park and surrounding suburbs who have run into some fairly serious trouble with the law. Doing all the good you can is Kurt's driving ethos. So what they do is apply this to these kids who come in as basically unhirable people because they're not particularly good students, if good students at all. And the idea is to teach them some useful, hireable, and that is the operative word here, hireable, life and practical skills through working in the food service industry. And when you come right down to it, boil it down to its essence, those skills are really all about what a good servant is, because they have to become good servants to the public. And so the public comes in for some really wonderful food, wonderful coffee, astonishing bakery goods, oh wow, and conversation, all things that involve being in a community at its best at nearly every level. And from this community of patrons, the kids also get tutoring, mentoring, and investment of time, talent, and genuine interest from the very people who they wait on, who expect nothing back for their time, talent, and investment. They are 100% volunteers who, like Kurtz, want to do all the good they can. Now, too many of these kids have I hate to say this, but they do, I think, have a we eat what we kill understanding of the world. So exposure to these life-giving, generous patrons at Kurtz makes a difference in their outlook and in their lives. And it helps them see the world just a bit differently. For some, maybe quite differently. Several of the Kurtz graduates have gone on to find very meaningful and well-paying jobs in the restaurant industry all over Chicagoland. But regardless, they've all learned that what it means to be of service, which simply means giving of themselves. And hanging on the walls throughout Kurtz, there are placards with inspirational sayings that to a too worldly person may sound hokey as all get out, but they're true nonetheless. Quotes like these. This is my favorite. It's from John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach, who said, "You cannot live a perfect life without almost daily doing something for someone who will never be able to repay you." You can never live a perfect life without almost daily doing something for someone who will never be able to repay you. Well, maybe it sounds hokey, corny, but at Kurtz, these kids experience exactly that every day from the people that they wait on. who volunteer and help them and get involved in their lives in ways that they're not used to having older adults involved in their lives. And of course, Kurtz itself is the incubator for it all. At Kurtz, servanthood surrounds them in practical, supportive, and loving ways. This is a perfect living example of what James told Jesus and John as they scrambled, as we do, for favorable position. And I really think that had he known about it, Bob would have wholeheartedly supported Kurtz Cafe. Now, there's another placard in Kurtz called Family Rules. And many of these kids do come from deeply broken families. Some of these kids live on the street in abandoned cars, move night to night from a friend's house. So these rules may be truly foreign to them, but working in the supportive environment at Kurtz, ideally they experience the truth and the value of family rules. And I'm just going to read a few. And I would ask you to think about how they also apply to Bob's way of being. And I think you will find a very generous overlap. Again, prepare for hokey corny. It's still true. Help each other. Always tell the truth. Share. Do your best. Laugh at yourself. Say, I love you. Dare to try new things. Be thankful. Show compassion, dream bigger, respect one another, laugh out loud, keep your promises, say please and thank you, be grateful, think of others before yourself, and there is the crux of it all. Use kind words, know you are loved, apologize when you need to. Do any of these rules, family rules, remind you of Bob's presence in the world? And they are corny, right? Bob was a little bit corny, maybe a lot corny. I can just imagine what Bob's dad jokes were like. But sweep the corn aside and ask yourself, truly, how important are these rules in living the abundant life that Jesus hopes for us? And of course, completely in line with being a servant leader is the old golden rule. And we're getting to some group participation here. I need your help. The golden rule does not say, do unto others before they do it unto you, which sadly seems to be the mantra of too many people these days. No, that is not at all what it says. Rather, what does it say? Yes, you got it. Thank you. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat other people the way you would like to be treated, and the chances are pretty good that they're going to respond in kind. How simple, how profoundly true, and how perfect is that? The golden rule, by the way, in some form or fashion, is part and a key part of almost every religion in the world. So, this necessarily leads us to ask, can we, like Bob, be servant leaders who help others and please God? And in my best Minnesota accent, I'll say, oh, sure, you betcha. Because most of us really already are. We can work to make life better at home and in a wider world. We can try to live up to the family rules at Kurtz. We can embrace John Wooden's belief that we help some we know will never be able to pay us back. And it means we can follow John Wesley's admonition to do all the good you can. Or, if we forget all these wonderful maxims, and they are wonderful, then just remember the golden rule, because that is the capstone of it all. That's enough. That's all we need. And I believe it perfectly describes Bob Smith astride the world. I believe that Bob was a soul-happy man. being a servant leader. And as a reflection of that, maybe pictorial proof, look at your bulletin. Look at the last page. If you've ever seen a happier face in your life, a more of a man who was not afraid to be dignified, look at his bunny outfit, whatever that was, and the big smile. Well, he made the world better for it. He is missed and will be missed, and his generous and playful spirit will be missed, but we can carry it on. It's a priceless inheritance for his family and for us. And to his family, and especially to his grandchildren, I would say this. Your Pop-Pop, well, he is your Pop-Pop, and you've known him your entire lives. So you may well have taken his uniqueness for granted, and I get that. We do that. But I really encourage you not to do that. He simply would not go to the dark side that is so prevalent in our world now, and he really, really represented the best parts of humanity. So Bob, rest in peace, and family, be in peace. And that goes for all of us, of course, in our missing Bob. Amen, and blessed be. Would you join me in reciting the Lord's Prayer, which is printed in your bulletin? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. And now, for some wonderful family stories of Bob.
Hi. I'm Abby, oldest grandchild. Sorry if I cry. My Pop-Pop had a long, fulfilled life, according to all the stories he would tell us. He would always talk fondly of his life in New Wilmington, Boy Scouts, all the different jobs he had, barbershop, meeting his wife, our grandma, and so much more. I could spend an hour listing everything. He was always joyful. I've never seen him mad or upset about anything, just happy to be where he was, wherever he was. He always wanted to hear about school, sports, theater, band. He was probably more excited than me when I got my first job. I think he was my third phone call after my parents when I found out where I was going to be going after graduation. He's a legend at the Mundelein and Vernon Hills schools for being math grandpa, taking time out of his day to come and help kids understand whatever we were learning. I remember in elementary school, he would come to read in my class, and I'd be so proud he was there, so happy he got to see little me during school. Being a brother, husband, father, and grandfather was always the role he was supposed to play in life. Everything else was extra. Performing with my dad and uncle in national barbershop competitions, inspiring music in both of them, and promoted traveling the world with them are memories that will live long. I remember as a kid dreading the long barbershop Christmas concert thinking, I don't want to watch a bunch of old men sing. And now missing each holiday season where we no longer get to see Pop-Up dressed up in his tux with the red vest. All the grandkids will remember the story of The Missing Piece, which for those who haven't read it, is about a circle rolling around its world trying to find its missing piece, but misses out on everyday joy in the process. A story in which the 6-year-old could not understand at the time, but looking back, Pop-Up did not have a missing piece. He was a full circle, at least in my eyes. It felt like he had everything he wanted in life: a loving wife, 2 loving sons, and 5 grandchildren he could brag about. What more could you need? He was our biggest cheerleader, and although we lost the physical presence of him, the impact, memories, and teachings will stay with us the rest of our lives and hopefully beyond. He was so loved by so many in this life, and he knew it. I hope he's having a party in heaven, celebrating with his mom and dad. We will miss him dearly, and I know he would be crying right now as well, hearing all the nice things said about him, since it was always the goal on his birthday to write a message in the card that would trigger tears. So we are here to say goodbye to his voice, but not his message. Goodbye to his hands, but not his touch. Goodbye to his heart, but not his love.
All right. Hello, I am Dakota Smith, and today I want to tell you, about a small slice of the wonderful man my Uncle Bob was. Growing up, I always knew who my Uncle Bob was, a loving teddy bear of a man who lived in the cool big city. As a girl from a small town, I thought Uncle Bob had made it. I didn't really get to know him too closely, though, until the last 10 years of his life. When I was 17, I made the solo trip up to Chicago to check out some colleges. I was ready for an adventure. From the moment I told Uncle Bob that I was coming to Chicago, he was so excited for me. I remember the moment when I stepped off the Amtrak train in Union Station, and he brought me to his car, him and Aunt Jan. And rather than driving me straight home, he drove me all around downtown Chicago, showing me every single site that he could, despite the fact that Lollapalooza was taking place, and at any moment, hordes of teenagers would come pouring out of Grant Park. Once home, it didn't stop. Even though it was almost 11 p.m. at night, he made sure I still had food to eat from my long trip. Throughout the rest of that trip, he drove me to each college that I was interested in, pretty much posing as my dad, and was there for me through everything. I have extremely fond memories of eating at some of the most iconic Chicago eateries with Bob, Uncle Bob, to this day. When I finally did move to Chicago, Uncle Bob was the first person I called to help me find a place to live. Him and Aunt Jan graciously let me stay at his house while I went to the city each day to apartment hunt. Throughout my time in Chicago, Uncle Bob always made sure to check in with me regularly, even if that meant a random FaceTime call at 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. While at the time, I may have been caught off guard and may not have answered, I will definitely miss those random 2:30 p.m. FaceTime calls. Uncle Bob was always there to welcome me and so many others with open arms, no matter the opportunity. Some people in life get 1 or 2 grandfathers, but to me, Uncle Bob has become like a 3rd grandfather. As I get to know my fiance, Max, one of the most important people I wanted him to meet was Uncle Bob. I always admired how caring, giving, and kind Uncle Bob was to not only his relationship with Aunt Jan, but with everyone he met as well. I wanted to show Max, this incredibly special person to me, and of course, Uncle Bob adored him. We know that we have his marriage blessing and hope to emulate the love that Uncle Bob and Aunt Jan shared for the past 61 years. While there's a massive void that Uncle Bob has left behind, I'll cling to the memories and the countless ways he showed up for me and for many others. I hope that I can emulate even a fraction of the joy for life that Uncle Bob had. Thank you.
must have been cold there in my shadow to never have sunlight on your face. You've been content to let me shine. You've always walked the step behind. I was the one with all the glory, while you were the one with all the strength. Only a face without a name. I never once heard you complain. Did you ever know that you're my hero and everything I like to be? I can fly higher than an eagle, 'cause you are the wind beneath my wings. It might have appeared to go unnoticed, but I've got it all here in my heart. I want you to know I know the truth. I would be nothing without you. Did you ever know that you're my hero and everything I like to be? I can fly higher than an eagle, 'cause you are the wind beneath my wings. You are the wind beneath my wings.
Hey, I'm Charlie. I'm the second youngest grandchild. And I wanted to share a few things that Papa taught me. First, he taught me where every Dairy Queen in the state of Illinois is, which is pretty crucial, obviously. But more majorly, a lot more majorly, he showed me what love is. His heart was bigger, and he loved harder than anyone I've ever met. He definitely didn't say it out loud, but his actions showed it. He proudly volunteered in all of my classrooms in elementary school. He'd be sitting beaming as he watched me sing in choir and compete in cheer competitions. There wasn't an event he didn't go to. When I had my art show, he came and he sat himself in front of my booth and didn't move all night. He examined every single piece I made and asked questions about it. Pop-Up also taught me the power of words.
He taught me to speak with my chest and tell people how I feel often. When I close my eyes and think about him, I can think about his eyes and the way that he would look at me when I told him I loved him. I can't describe the way they would change, but his gaze became softer and almost teary every single time I said so. I will always tell people how much they mean to me because of him. Lastly, he taught me to ask questions. He knew a little bit about almost everything and anything I asked, and if he didn't, he would question with me. His curiosity was contagious, and he loved to learn. My pop-up shaped me into who I am today, and I love him a whole lot.
I'm Dylan, the oldest boy, just one younger than Abby. I just have two just short ones. Bob was just everything to me. The first one is when I was 15, learning to drive. He would come over all the time, or at least ask all the time to come over, and we would just drive. And this one drive, we were just driving for hours. I think it felt like we were just aimlessly, no GPS, just driving and talking. And we had been in about an hour in, and we end up at a dead end. We end up in just some, I know exactly where it is now. It's the Salvation Army parking lot in the big weird warehouse. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere at a dead end. And I just look at him, I go, well, where are we going now, Pop-Up? And he looks at me and he goes, do you want ice cream? And I pull out my phone to go, get directions to the Dairy Queen, and he goes, you don't need that. I know where it is. And he directs me the whole way there. And the second one really gets me. It's whenever you would talk to him on the phone, you close with, bye, Pop-Up, I love you. And he would always pause, and you could hear the smile in his voice, and he would say back, I love you too. And it was almost as if it caught him off guard every time just to hear it. And it meant so much that on his last day, his last couple hours, I could go there and I could just tell him that, I love him too. And he's the reason that I do everything, that I keep going forward, is the joy that he shows to other people. And I was crying earlier because there's just so many wonderful people here that loved him very much, and he would have just been so happy to be here and see everyone. And I'm just so grateful for all of you for that. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Isabel, and I'm the youngest grandchild. For me, my pop-up wasn't just my grandpa. He was probably the funniest man I knew, the most loving, smart, and caring. But most important, he was my mentor through the first 15 years of my life. His bright blue, beautiful eyes lit up every room he ever walked into. One moment that has been playing in my head and that I can't get out of is that the one night that he texted me and my sister and asked if we wanted to go out for dinner. I don't think me and my sister ever turned down an offer for free food. We went to Culver's. It was our favorite. It was that kind of dinner where we just asked questions over and over. The first question I asked him is, if he could be anywhere in the world, where would he want to be? He looked up at us like we were asking a ridiculous question. And right there, he just said, right here with my grandchildren. He never let anything in his life upset him. At least it truly felt like that. For maybe the past 7 years of my life, I've discovered Pop-Up loved ice cream as much as I did. This meant I had a built-in ice cream buddy. I don't think he ever said no to going to Dairy Queen to get a large chocolate shake or just a vanilla ice cream cone. As I stand here today and read this, I know that my Pop would want my life to go on and accomplish every dream I ever wanted. There's something about him that I don't see in a lot of people. He gave everything to everyone and expected nothing back. After every call, I would always end with, bye, Pop-Up, I love you. He would just pause and look at me. He would pause and say, I love you too.
My dad was fond of the expression, "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." This phrase, spoken with such conviction that it would make his eyes mist up, encapsulates his spirit. Though Mark Twain may have said it first, my dad lived it. Growing up in a small town in western Pennsylvania, he lost his father at 14 and watched my grandmother raise him and my 2 uncles on her own. I think the challenges he faced early in life made him feel like an underdog, but he never let that define him. He loved the movies Field of Dreams and Hoosiers, seeing his reflection in these stories. Field of Dreams spoke to him deeply, especially the theme of getting one more chance. He would recount the first time he saw the movie in the theater. He would recall with great clarity how he sobbed through the last 15 minutes of the movie when he realized how the story would end. All of the main character's efforts to follow the voice in his head would culminate in one more catch with his estranged and long-deceased father. Similarly, Bob had a recurring dream of trying to talk to his father, but being unable to get his attention for several years. This dream persisted until one night in his 40s, something shifted. That night, Bob was talking to his father, introducing my mother, my brother, and me to his dad, telling him how happy he was and what a great life he had with his family. After that, the restless dreams ended. Hoosiers, a story of redemption and small-town basketball, resonated with him as well. It's a story about underdogs with a David and Goliath type finish. These movies and his life were about more than redemption or second chances. The universal themes are self-belief and potential. This idea of potential struck me profoundly after he passed. While he never said it explicitly, I realized this belief in potential was woven into everything he did. He modeled it in his professional life. He relished serving on staffing committees and as a people leader, seeing the potential in candidates. He lived it in his personal life, volunteering with various organizations and in each of his grandchildren's classrooms. He did things like befriending a young woman from his high school who was going to attend Northwestern. My parents invited her and her friends to events at their home like trick-or-treating and Easter dinner. These are just a few examples of what he did for others. I think he did the things that he wished someone might have done for him. He believed in potential and saw it in everyone around him, in his peers, co-workers, fellow musicians, the less fortunate, and especially in children. Late in his life, he recounted multiple times the unlikely story of how his parents met at Westminster College. His father, encouraged by a teacher, took a statewide scholarship exam and came in second. Fortunately, the winner chose to attend college out of state, meaning my grandfather was awarded the prized $100 scholarship. Bob's mother, who grew up on a farm, attended a one-room school for grades 1 through 8. When she was recognized for her academic potential, she was sent to live with relatives near Pittsburgh to complete high school, and she received her first year of college tuition as a gift from them. I think Bob believed it was only because someone had seen the potential in both his father and his mother that he was ever born. Bob had a beautiful heart. He saw magic in children. Music touched his soul. He loved this quote about music by Thomas Carlyle: "Music is well said to be the speech of angels. In fact, nothing among the utterances allowed to man is felt to be so divine. It brings us near to the infinite." To me, this explained why Bob's eyes would well up when he was moved by a song or performance. For him, music transcended. It was about being touched by the divine. Having lost his father at 14, he became a trailblazer in how to live his life. In his 40s, he became the longest living male in his family for at least 3 generations, setting a new record each day. While this was wonderful, it sometimes left him unsettled. About 4 years ago, we were having lunch together, and he wondered aloud why he was still alive when the previous generations of men in his family had long passed before they had reached his age. I told him he was doing it. He had been serving his purpose for years. He successfully played many roles: husband, father, professional, musician, but most of all, he was made to be a pop-up. His magnum opus was written in the final chapter of his life. This was him at his best. The culmination of years of trying, failing, learning, loving, persevering, and showing up. It was all leading up to becoming Pop-Up, truly his greatest role. It was then when he realized his full potential. Over the years, Bob wrote a series of short I Remember stories about growing up in a small town for his hometown newspaper in Pennsylvania. He wrote about music and how much he loved singing with others. Being a part of a team was everything to him. He believed he could achieve more as part of a team, a choir, a group of focused and dedicated people than he ever could have by himself. He wrote personal letters on special occasions like birthdays. And just this week, I found a poem I had never seen that was essentially hiding in plain sight on his computer. I'd like to close by sharing a few of Bob's reflections with you. The first one is called The Milk Truck. In the small town I grew up in, milk came from a cow on a local farm and was always delivered to our homes by the local dairy's milk truck. The driver was Mr. McDonald, the owner of the dairy farm. Our house was the first stop on our block. Mr. McDonald carefully drove the truck up the long driveway. The neighborhood children were always excited to see his truck. We would gather around the truck begging for a ride. Mr. McDonald usually obliged. 6 or more of us would squeeze in the space between the metal crates that held the glass bottles, and our slow trip up the block began. The truck would stop at each of the 6 houses and then return to the bottom of our driveway, where it would stop and we would exit. Thanks were exchanged, and we went back to play while Mr. McDonald continued his route. The next one has 2 little pieces that were written at 2 different times, but the title is Christmas Carols. In the small town that I grew up in, Christmas was a very big event. So was singing Christmas carols. We sang in school and in church, and children in our neighborhood, we decided we would go caroling to each house. We gather ourselves dressed for the cold weather and armed with 2 candles, sang at each home where one of us had a parent. I know our parents were pleased with our efforts. I know every time I sing Christmas carols with my children, or theirs, I think warmly about the adventure on cold winter nights. This is part 2. By the time we got to high school, most of us sang at school or in a church choir. In my senior year at our Christmas Eve pageant, Peggy McLaughlin from our neighborhood sang a solo of I Wonder as I Wander. Even though she was 15, her voice had matured. Her interpretation of the song was stunning. I felt as though I had met a friend again for the first time. Only later in life, when I learned what the word epiphany meant, did I understand what I had experienced that night. I think of her and that night every time I hear that song. And finally, and this one's going to test me, a poem, simply titled, I Am Inspired By. I'm inspired by music that lifts my emotions. I'm inspired by people who have vision of growth and fulfillment and live their vision. I'm inspired by long shots who achieve by talent, dedication, and perseverance, often with little support. By people who stay with their vision even at high costs. I'm inspired by loyal friends who stay with you even when times are tough. I'm inspired by people who understand how history and events shaped them and use it to inspire others. I'm inspired by teachers who inspire their students to reach beyond their limits. I'm inspired by the unconditional love of children. I'm inspired by those who have a high energy level and share it with others. I'm inspired by people who are willing to take a risk. On behalf of myself and our extended family, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you all for being with us today. Your love and support means the world to us. Thank you.
Our final hymn this afternoon is Amazing Grace. And as you're able, please rise. If you would remain standing, which you already are, for the benediction. But before I get to the benediction, I wanted to first remind you that there is a reception in Tolman Hall beneath us. I've been shown how to get there, but I get lost. So you're going to have to find your own way unless there are ushers who can show you. And there is an elevator. That direction? Thank you. And the other thing, Jan and family, if you have not been up here to see how the sanctuary is filled up, it's pretty wonderful. A lot of people are here to support you all. So if you haven't looked, please do, because this is spectacular. So Let's join together in saying the benediction. Go out into the world in peace. Hold on to what is good. Return no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all people, as you love and serve the Lord, rejoicing in the Holy Spirit. Amen.